Hello and welcome. HUB's very excited to bring you this topic around the increasing importance and fast-growing millennial market. And what we want to do is to share with you some practical insights and thoughts from a panel of specialist advisors and consultants. So let's start with the panel. I'm going to ask each participant to briefly introduce yourself and a little bit about what you do in your practice. So we might start with Trent, please.
Yeah, thanks very much, Brett. My name's Trent Bell and I work for R&B Financial as a Senior Financial Advisor. Within the business, basically overall, my clientele range from anywhere at millennial stage right the way through to baby boomers and those that are progressing well into their retirement phase. It's something that I enjoy doing with quite a lot of passion in and around the ever-changing environment that we have, and look to assist all clients where I can on a regular basis.
Great. Peter?
Thanks, Brett, and good to be here. Welcome to everybody. I've been in the industry over 35 years, so I've seen a number of changes along the way. I'm a founding partner of Arrow Private Wealth based in Melbourne. We do broadly three things. We have an advice business, we have a separate asset investment management business, and a key area for focus for us is what we call family succession planning, which eventually leads to estate planning. So happy to touch on that later on, Brett, for millennials.
Great. And Adele, welcome.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Adele Martin, Money Mentor. I'm the founder of the Saving Squad podcast and creator of My Money Buddy. And I specialize in helping people in their 20s, 30s and 40s maximize their money so they can do more of what they love.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all for participating in this and taking time out of your busy schedules. So I think we've got two millennials in here, and I think we've got a baby boomer potentially, and that might be a bit rude saying that. And I think I just scrape in between the Generation X and baby boomers, but a nice blend of opinions and thoughts and experience. So how was our panel chosen? We wanted to give different perspectives from two different practice owners in different phases, I guess, in their business. Trent's growing his practice and deals with a lot of millennials. Peter has an established business and is looking at how to tap into that next part of the marketplace and get to the next generation as they come through. In addition, Adele runs her own practice, but also consults to many other practices around social media, around technology, around dealing with millennials. So I think that Adele can bring to this discussion a broader understanding of multiple practices and some thoughts there. So again, thank you for joining us. So let's move straight into the discussion. So the first question that I've got is how are you actually working with millennials, and why are they actually important to your business and your business in the future, I guess? I might kick off with Trent firstly on that one.
Yeah, thanks very much, Brett. Look, in working with millennials, I find that actually assisting them to look at investing their savings that they may have. A lot of the clientele that I do have are either still at home with mum and dad and they don't have very many expenses from the external world, so they're looking to invest their money appropriately, put it towards systems such as that of First Home Super Saver Scheme, but also looking to boost up their own position from a personal investment point of view and how they can better utilize their funds today to look forward to their upcoming future over the next, say, 5 to 10 years. And that really is a big element that I hear from the clients that I've got, that they're looking to build quickly, save for something that's quite important to them, such as, say, buying their first house, and in fact that of looking at building together as either a couple or even an individual over the next 5 or 10 years to achieve some midterm goals.
Great. Okay. Trent, what I might do, I forgot to do this, was perhaps just to start with the definition of what a millennial is. And so the technical definition is those born between 1980 and 2000. So they will be people in their age group between 22 and 42. So, that's quite a range, and many of those are perhaps going to be the ones that inherit, the retirement savings built up. So, Peter, do you want to just talk about why they're important to your business?
Thanks, Brett. For me, I'm well qualified in dealing with millennials because I actually have 5 of them in my own family. So 5 children born in that time frame. So between 1986 and 1996, pick a year and I've got one. So I well and truly deal with millennials. Whether I understand them is a different matter. But to answer your question more specifically, when I started a long time ago, my client base were very similar to my own age, which is where we're talking about now. And so I've built and grown with them over a period of time to the point where they were classified as baby boomers. If I was coming into the industry today, I'd be looking for what we call emerging entrepreneurs. So 3 reasons why this is an important segment for us. First of all, they're building their own wealth. And just like Trent said before, there's a reason for them to be thinking and planning their own wealth future. Part of that is that they've got longevity on their side, and we might well touch on this later on, that most millennials, if they look after themselves here, are going to live to 100 and or beyond, which is a really interesting concept that our industry needs to tackle further directly. And the millennials are aware of that. Second reason why this is important is that there's a massive wealth transfer that has already started and will continue on. And we want to make sure that we're well placed inside our own client base to be able to do that. And the third area is a really clear decision that we've made is to target inside our own business and connection, our words, emerging entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs, and we'll talk about that a little bit further on as well, who have the ability to generate substantial wealth. And that in this time has never been more opportunist for them to be able to do that. So that's the reason we're working with millennials.
Right. Del, your observations of different practices?
Yeah, so, well, personally for me, why I chose to work with millennials is I celebrated 2 decades in advice last year. The first half of that, 10 years, was working with retirees. And I would hear them say over and over, I wish we saw years ago. They now didn't have maybe the health or the wealth to do all the things that they wanted to be able to do. And so I knew if I wanted to make a real impact, I had to see people much earlier. And so that's why coming close to 10 years ago, I started working with millennials. So those in their 20s, 30s and 40s. So that's my particular why and reason. Having worked with them, I knew that I had to create a model, a really scaled model that did it in a really cost-effective way. And so that's why I've created a program called My Money Buddy. It's a 6-week self-paced program that they go through. And so they do things like setting goals and creating a spending plan and understanding superannuation. And yeah, I mean, one of the most popular trainings inside there is how to negotiate a salary, how to get a pay rise. People have used that training to get pay rises of $20,000. So yeah, that's what I've chosen to do and focused on that. What I found really interesting is these people are now graduating. Over the last 12 months, we've had 100 people go through the program. And what's now happening is they're graduating and they're now wanting one-on-one advice to take that next step. We've now built up enough trust with them that, and now they understand more areas that they need advice on. So yeah, it's also been interesting to me that several people that have done the program, it's not a super cheap program, it's $1,500, have already got advisors. And so it was interesting to me that they would pay $1,500. But the thing is, what I found is advisors are so rushed, they're so time poor, they're so concentrating on the compliance stuff, they don't have time to do all the stuff that adds value. And so a program like this helps educate them, and they understand more what questions to ask to know whether the advisor is doing a good job. And yeah, so that's been super interesting observation as well. But yeah, and so now what's happening is I've discovered this is actually a really great onboarding process. So clients onboard themselves. So this works really well with traditional one-on-one advice. So clients set up their own spending plans, they do their own goal discussion, do their own risk profiling. So it's working really well with traditional financial advice business. So I'm helping people create their own programs that suit their financial planning business. And it saves the advisors heaps of time. I don't know, as an advisor, I find I was repeating myself 1,000 times. I was explaining risk profile 100 times, you know, what risk profiling was. And so by having this onboarding sequence like this, where people watch a video, they do the training, they might take action and do a risk profile questionnaire, it saved me as an advisor a lot of time and has onboarded the client before I even see them.
Yeah, that's great. Building up that educational level and then being able to engage thereafter. I think very, very good idea. Turning to the next question, what makes millennials different to baby boomers, and what are they looking for? Are they looking for different things? Peter, do you want to kick that one off?
First of all, maybe to answer that question, I talk about what are the key areas, what were the core values of baby boomers, and therefore to differentiate. Baby boomers predominantly had three things in their mind. First of all, they were focused on their own family, their own children, really, really important. Upwards on their parents, and we've seen that baby boomers looking after parents more than ever before. But their core values were around their family. Secondly, was around health and lifestyle. Many baby boomers were focused on. And the third bit then was financial certainty or financial security. So baby boomers, that was their core areas and still is today. Millennials, from my experience, and again, Trent and Adele can add to this clearly, have a worldview vastly different to their parents and or their grandparents. They have a global view, and that spills out into socially responsible investing, climate change impact, and ESG and the governance type issues around that. Secondly, and I touched on it before, Brett, is this concept of longevity. They actually have a long view, vastly different to the conversation I started. People, all they wanted to do was get to 55 and retire, which is what a nonsense concept that is. But that was the conversation that many wanted to have. And the third thing is that they have a less materialistic view of the world because they're now starting to be conscious of what's going on around them. But trust is really, really important, building that trust, and no doubt Adele and Trent will have visions on that. So for us, understanding the values of baby boomers versus the different concepts and how we engage with the millennials on a different worldview and a concept of longevity in particular.
Peter, just further to that, what are the things that are actually probably the same between both groups?
The things that are the same is the things that we as advisors should always be doing, which is actually having values-based conversations. And values-based conversations basically means what are the things that are important to you? And that might be slightly different from their parents and their grandparents. But when we ask those values-based conversations, they'll tell you that. For many millennials, their peers are really, really important, whereas before it was all about family. The baby boomers would go home, they'd lock the gate, they sit behind their wall, whereas millennials are now much more social, and we're in a connected world. But we still have core values, and it's a really important point to understand that. But their values have slightly shifted from where their parents were before.
Yeah. Okay, Trent?
Yeah, look, I think a lot of the bits and pieces that Peter touched on there are very important, and especially one of those elements being options. I find that in this day and age, there are options everywhere you look. So not only is it that they can find something like an ESG or a new product that they want, or they're looking to invest over here a specific way, there are so many options available to them because it's at their fingertips. It's all part of the new technology that they've got. Anything is available at any point in time, whether it's rain, hail, shine, 1 a.m. in the morning, 7 p.m. at night, it's right there in front of them. So accommodating for millennials is a little bit different to the baby boomers in that baby boomers are more set in their ways. They have a certain structure about the way that they want to go about things, and they're also looking at investments on a broader range because that's now available to them. Whereas millennials have had this in their back pocket the whole time. So they're looking to, go and explore different avenues or come to you with different ideas. How can I approach life a different way because of X, Y, and Z that's happening in their current circumstances? So for millennials at the moment, I do say that they are looking to, and this does take into consideration a lot of them, carve their way up, say, the corporate ladder, or receive an inheritance from loved ones that have passed, or require guidance around allocating their resources better going to suit their kids, their own path to retirement, whether or not that is purchasing a first home, investment properties to build on their current, asset base, but maybe even education costs, because that's not getting any cheaper these days either. So the millennials are having to go through a different path to that of what baby boomers did, as well as looking to receive, say, that inheritance or early inheritance from their parents, who may not necessarily need it as much as what they do at this point in time. So I do see a lot of them looking to build on that wealth. And with the baby boomers, they're looking to maintain it or making sure they have security around that wealth for their future generations. So I believe that millennials and baby boomers play a massive part in a book or financial advice business, but at the end of the day, millennials do have a different take on their goals and objectives at this point in time compared to that of the baby boomers that we're experiencing right now, especially in our work.
Just a quick question for you. Is the risk-taking side of things different between are millennials likely to take higher risk?
Generally, with the clients that I've spoken to and I interact with on a regular basis, do actually tend to have that of a higher risk profile. So they're looking at higher growth for their position today, rather than taking, say, a growth or balanced approach. A lot of that does come down to, say, an inheritance point of view as well, knowing that their parents have money or knowing that their grandparents have money that will ultimately filter down to them, and they're using that as more of a safety blanket as well. So when I'm going through their risk profiles, they do tend to look on, say, the higher risk profile with a lot of ease, compared to that of back in the day where people are very cautious around their options when it comes to risk profiling.
Yeah.
Brett, can I throw a couple of comments in to pick up on what Trent just said there? I think there's three reasons why that might be the case when we're talking about risk. The first thing is, and I touched on it before, their time perspective is much, much longer. So they're actually, they have the propensity to have a broader conversation. Second thing is they've got a lot more options, exactly as Trent said, about investing, and where their parents didn't have anywhere near the same exposure globally, private equity, private markets, and the plethora of ways technology can access. But the third thing, and this is the encouragement to the people watching this podcast, is that this is a conversation we need to be having more and more, explaining risk rather than just categorising them in the old days, or you're balanced or you're growth, basically depending upon their age or how much money they've got. Having a broader conversation and engaging them with tools that exist in the marketplace, explaining correctly what risk is. And risk is, there's a dozen factors around risk. Millennials are getting across all that sort of stuff. So these are the things that are the opportunities and the challenge for our industry. This is why this is such a good conversation, because it will challenge people as advisors today to be sharpening their thinking in tackling this group of people.
Adele?
Yeah, I guess for me, there's lots of differences. The biggest differences I see, and I've worked with both retirees and millennials now, they really want less friction and they expect it. And sometimes as advisors, we've done what we've always done and we have a lot of friction in our advice process. So, we'll send someone an email to book an appointment or ring them. I am a millennial. I will screen my calls. If I don't know your number, I will block you. So we have to think about how they want to be communicated with. And so for most of my clients, it's via text or messenger. And I see some advisors, sending them a blank authority to go get printed to fill out. Well, my clients don't have printers. They don't know someone that's a JP. I think sometimes we make it so hard for them to actually get advice and we forget about that. So I think where possible, if we can introduce less friction, and I can share later on some of the tools that I use to have less friction in the advice, I think that's going to be a big part of it. The other thing is we've already touched on, definitely more concerned about, and then have more information about investing. You know, the amount of online investment platforms that was opened during the pandemic was like nothing we've ever seen. They're interested in investing. They understand it more, you know, and definitely the environmental, they're very conscious about the environment, impact of climate change, you know, all that equality. That's very important issues to them. And so we're having more conversations, you know, around that. But yeah, and the other thing I think that makes this generation different is we're not necessarily going to have the security of the age pension. We don't have the same job security, the one job forever. You know, there is a gig economy. You could be working casual for multiple jobs, you know, be self-employed. They've got different issues that we need to help support them with. And so, yeah, and the other big difference, like with retirees, when I worked with retirees, I was taking a fear away from them. Like, this is an immediate need, an issue right now. I was taking that fear away. Whereas with the younger clients and millennials that I work with, it's really around painting a vision for them. It's very different marketing and sales, you know, that you do with them, because it's very different. So yeah, that was just some of the differences, and I agree with some of the other things that Trent and Peter talked about as well.
Good. Adele, I might just pick up on something you're sort of saying there earlier, which is about maybe being time poor or blocking, or you know, the way in which they want to be communicated. And it sort of begs the question around how do you develop trust? Trust sort of often comes with people who've got a lot of time, and it's a relationship build, etc. And I'm just wondering what you've seen in terms of that, and particularly given that the millennials will listen a lot more to peers and social media and opinions and that type of thing. I'm just wondering how do you...
Absolutely. We are a super skeptical generation. We don't like being sold to. We're fearful of anyone selling to us. We're very skeptical. So how do you do that in a way? How do you build that trust quickly as an advisor? So I think what advisors miss is this piece, the nurture piece. We might be good at getting clients in, but we don't like getting first appointments, but we don't necessarily have this nurture piece. And so some of the ways that I nurture clients, podcast, my podcast, The Saving Squad, has been a great way to nurture clients. So when a new client, you know, comes across me on the podcast, they've sometimes listened to me for 20 hours. So they've binged a whole heap of stuff. Now, a podcast is very intimate. You're in their ear. It's very intimate, and so it builds up trust really quickly. And what I love about the podcast, I've done it once, done a season. I can add to the season if I want, but it's not something that you have to do forevermore. It lives there. So something like that podcast can be really good. Email can be great. That's something that I've really didn't spend a lot of time on email nurture until a year or two ago. I get lots of leads from email nurture now. So that's a big part of it. So a Facebook group is another way as well. There's lots of ways that you can build up trust that can be done as in a very scaled way by the advisor, and that doesn't really take, you know, a lot of time. So that's definitely one. I think your online presence is going to be really important, because they will Google you. So things like, have you got Google reviews? Is that something you can ask your current clients for, as an example? Your website needs to be authority building. So, you know, where have you been featured? Have you got some PR, some awards that you can put on your website to help build that, you know, credibility up? So, you know, as an example, I was just speaking to a young advisor this morning who's just starting out his own practice, and we're talking about ways you can get PR. One way is something called Source Bottle. SOURCE. It's journalists looking for experts all the time. So that's a great way to be able to build up your authority piece. So yeah, that can really help as well. But there's a stat I heard that 8 out of 10 Gen Yers will or only ever purchase if they've read a review first. Most of them will go to a review first. So those Google reviews and Facebook reviews become critical. And yeah, PR and your authority building website, because they will Google you. That they will do that.
Yeah, I certainly know I don't book accommodation somewhere without taking a sneak peek at a view and or a review and comments, etc. Trent, do you want to share on the trust build? You know, how that's done?
Yeah, look, I have to agree with everything that Adele was just saying there. I think that that's an excellent foundation to actually build on trust with a client. What I'm actually seeing a lot more is the engagement with Facebook Facebooks or the platforms that are available to them. You know, there's a lot of voices out there that you can have, such as, you know, Instagram, Twitter, you know, Facebook, any of those platforms where you can actually reach out to those clients and provide, say, your thoughts, your says, even LinkedIn to a certain extent. Those people are then reading your understanding, your thoughts, your perspective on things, and they can associate or agree with to some extent as well. I do have to say that building up, say, reviews online is probably the biggest thing that you can have as your ammunition there. That there is really going to set the tone. So if you have, say, reviews on yourself or your practice, and those are, say, 2 or 3 star reviews, you may not necessarily have clientele that are looking to then come on board with you. And that's kind of where we come back to what we were talking about before with options that are available to millennials. It's at their fingertips. They can look at a review from one brand and then go to the next brand and look at another review. So that's another way that you can really build up your own position, make sure you've got excellent interaction with your clients that you specifically requested to put reviews online with, or if you can actually ask them to just ad hoc do something like a review for you. That is where you actually start with building the trust with others that are looking to either use you or have been referred to you as well. And that's where I've actually found a massive part of the trust element comes from as well, is the referrals themselves. So, you know, it's not as if we're going out there every day and advertising ourselves left, right, and centre because we've got the cash to do that. What we actually need to do is work on our internal referrals as well. And that comes from, say, the parents. That comes from the people that are saying, hey, listen, look, I've got Jimmy and Bobby over here, and they're, you know, they're 35 and 40 years old, and they're looking for a little bit of assistance around their position because they're really just not sure where to go. So that there is a warm referral lead that needs to be nurtured, and the engagement needs to be on point with those referrals as well. To let something go cold is probably the worst outcome that you can have. So that is a massive trust element that you can actually utilize as well, where it's an internal referral from your clients in order to, you know, have that discussion with them and build that near on, you know, automatic trust with that individual, and make sure that they're on board with who you are and your operation as well. So absolutely, with everything Adele was saying, I couldn't, yeah, there's nothing more that I can really add there. It was absolutely brilliant, but I just think that nurturing and engagement, they are the biggest key elements there, making sure they're fully aware of their circumstances around, you know, legislation and regulations, send out emails to them on a regular basis, keep them engaged, and prevent any major time delays with each of these clients. I think that also builds a lot of trust as well.
Yeah, nothing like warm referred leads too, where there's already a trust of some sort. Peter, do you want to comment on trust build with the next generation down? Like,
yeah, happy to do so. We're talking a lot about trust. Trust is earned. You don't just walk into trust. And so for us, I would encourage people, what are you thinking about trying to build trust? And Alan and Trent have given us a lot of practical tips around that and endorse those. For us, Google reviews is massive in every client meeting. We've got a whole process around Google reviews in every client meeting aspect of that as well. And the social website, Google all that. The issue is, how do you make connection, first of all? And increasingly, and this audience here, they're all visual. And so as a firm, are you creating content, your own content that's video, and putting that out in a number of ways? Are your newsletters engaging? Are there 2 or 3 videos that you are creating as part of all those areas as well? Really important.
Can I just add something? If you are going to do video, a massive fan of video, make sure you add subtitles, because most millennials will listen on quiet. They won't listen with sound on because it might be at work or commuting or whatever. So make sure you add subtitles to get that extra engagement.
There you go. So there you go, folks. Those listening on the line, that's worth just getting to this point of the podcast. But Brett, I think there's probably two senses of eyes of businesses on all audience. One's looking to create new contacts in millennials, so establish new people that they have no connection with at all. But the second part, if I can encourage, many of us have older clients, baby boomers, whatever you want, are we actually data mining our existing database? Do we know extensive information around their children and or their grandchildren? And are we building as much information as possible so that we can, we've got that clearly and we can then data mine that. It's a really, really important part, and it's something in our own organisation we spend a fair bit of time, in fact a lot of time, building information around that so that we can interrogate it, data mine it, and then start to personalise connections with families. So for us, our millennials sit in our family groups already. We're not really looking for lots of new people to walk through our door, mostly in a virtual sense. They all sit, all the value for us pretty well sits inside our own business already, but we've got to make those connections with that generation or two below that.
The parallel there too, I think, Peter, when you started talking about, data mining and knowing your client bases is what companies like Woolworths and Coles do, on our buying habits. They seem to know more about me than myself and what I want. So it's the way everything is now, that's for sure. Peter, you sort of mentioned early on about intergenerational wealth being a massive part, and I guess you're sitting on a very strong client base. Do you want to just talk about how you're addressing that?
Sure.
That intergenerational, the loss of potential clients if you haven't got the relationship going at the next level.
Indeed. Yeah. What's really important for us is separating advice from investment, and we've done that clearly in our conversations. But the third important point, and it really is the foundation in many, many ways, and for many clients, it's where they actually want to start, which is around what we call family succession planning. That then leads to estate planning. You bring the lawyers and the draftees in at the end, but it's talking about with a client around what's in their heart and mind for themselves, for their own children or grandchildren, and equally, can I say, for their own parents and elderly and other people who are in their family grouping. And so it's understanding all of those parts. And so we have a very deliberate strategy around this family succession planning that then leads to making sure the documentation is in order. And at the end of all of that, then we have family grouping meetings, and what we call, we have values-based family conversations. And at the end of the estate planning, when all the documentation and is the way that they want, we have them in our own boardroom, and we facilitate and host that, where mum and dad bring in their children, and we have a family meeting that might go 2 or 3 hours, and mum and dad get to talk about what's in their heart and mind. And I'm not talking about 80 or 90-year-olds, I'm talking about 50, 55, 60-year-olds. Now, I'm not bringing their 12-year-old children in, that's a little bit early, but it's an extraordinary conversation. And the emotional, what we're doing then is we're starting to connect with that generation, and they're starting to see, hang on, this firm is looking after mum and dad. They also can see the values that this organisation stands for, and there's this aspirational part of it. So there's an emotional connection that often moves them towards it. And by the way, mum and dad are actually very, very often, Brett, are willing to pay for advice to get their own children's affairs in order, getting advice, getting some risk protection put in place, getting their wills and those sorts of areas as well. So it's an extraordinary opportunity, but they are facilitated in our boardroom, and I've had the privilege of sitting and listening to some wonderful conversations over the many, many years. For us, that's a perfect way for engaging millennials and the next generation of wealth transfer.
Yeah, I guess for the parents, there's a peace of mind knowing that their kids have got a plan and are going to be looked after, and yeah, that must give a lot of comfort. Sorry, Peter, were you going to say?
Yeah, I was just going to say, so many financial planning practices, and I use that word, financial planning practices, don't put out the message of longevity about their own business. And in the older days, business people built a practice and they looked to sell and they'd retire and they'd gone, and the business would be gone. And it's an interesting one. Are you having conversations with your clients about building an intergenerational business that's going to be here in 50 years' time to look after their family? It's a completely different mindset, which means you need to be thinking about your own strategy and longevity with inside how a practice looks. And again, these are the little parts where they are saying, yes, I'm building an intergenerational relationship here that's going to last beyond just one or two people.
Yeah, it's a good point. Just quickly, Trent, any comments about that? I guess building a base where you've got money coming out, which is the retiree market, versus buying or building something that has money coming in the accumulation phase. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And Peter, again, fantastic kind of outlay there of the structure and really good strategy there in facilitating that intergenerational wealth transfer as well. Recently, I've just actually read a statistic where I think it's 60 to 70% of wealth transfer is going to go to a new group, which is the kids or the grandkids, and those kids or grandkids will actually go and find a new advisor to deal with. So that there is something that I'm very focused on in maintaining, it's all about the affairs that have been dealt with at the baby boomer or retiree level, all the way down to we can deal with these same affairs, we can keep the generational wealth inside as well, and we can continue to manage the positions that we have and always will have managed for you and your kids and your grandkids as well. So it speaks back to what Peter was talking about there as well. So that engagement with the next generation is key, and it's something that we are always focused on when we are looking at elderly clients or that have actually raised it themselves to say, hey, listen, look, what can we do here? What's the outcome if this is going to be the case? How can we do this in the best possible way? That's when we would start that conversation and engage them and say, well, look, we actually think it would be actually pretty important to have this same conversation at a non-advice level with the next generation that is going to be receiving those funds, and or what we can do to assist them in the event that does actually happen. And Peter touched on a very important point there of estate planning as well. That is first and foremost, the crux of all this, to make sure that the structure is accurate. They've got the right advice around that from a solicitor that's actually specialised in that environment as well, in order to then have that wealth generation transfer as well to the next generation. And that is quite imperative across that first portion of the actual effort to have that intergenerational wealth transfer stay in-house and managed as well. But look, everything that Peter was saying before, I have to agree with, but it's also about building that relationship with that next generation, engaging with them as well as the first generation that we're actually assisting, and making sure that we have a relationship built so we don't become one of those statistics where 60–70% of those clients will actually look to go, or that next generation will look to go elsewhere.
Yeah, it's a good point. Adele, any further comments to add on that?
Yeah, so having the retiree business, I would agree with Peter about adding value, and so we too would have the family meeting, because just saying go to see my financial advisor, no one wants to go and see their mums and dad's financial advisor. It's not like a cool thing to do. So adding value, I think, is a great way to do that. Helping them understand what their role as executor or power attorney is, or navigating, doing all that, that family meeting, I think is great. And then having a way to make sure you nurture them. So after that, have you got a book that you've done? Have you got a Facebook group? Have you got a podcast? Some sort of way you can nurture them. So if you can do that via email, have a great way to be able to nurture them, add value. Then you might have, and I'm a big fan of this, a money masterclass or a webinar that you run. And now they've already seen you a couple of times, so they're probably likely to go to a webinar now because they've seen you a few times on email and in person at this. And so that's when you can talk about, all your services. So I'm a big fan of doing stuff at scale. Webinar is a great way to be able to do that. Don't call it a webinar, call it money masterclass, wealth masterclass, something like that. But you can only do that once you build up trust with someone. And so, yeah, I think having a way, if you do have an older client base, having some way to add value to them at that family meeting, and then building up that trust with them before you then, ask for that commitment sale for them.
Yeah, good point. So turning now to managed accounts or managed portfolios, so the structure. What role do managed portfolios or managed accounts play with millennial clients, and why? Like, what's the reason why they might like them, or why is it important about things like transparency and flexibility and that type of thing? yeah, Trent, do you want to make first comment?
Yeah, absolutely. So, look, I'm quite passionate about managed accounts, and I think it's actually the future of our industry as a whole. And to have those millennials engaging with something that is completely transparent and engaging at the same time is very important to their, not only their portfolios, but also maybe even look from a personal point of view, but also looking at, say, from a superannuation point of view. If they can actually see what they're investing in on day one, the ebbs and flows of the market, they're going to be more engaged and understand a lot more around the implications of certain elements such as interest rate hikes or as we're experiencing at the moment, the geopolitical tensions and the crisis that is currently undertaking. So all those elements can be actually viewed across a portfolio, direct assets held, but that's for the end client. That's for the millennial to actually log in, application in hand, and see their position on an everyday basis. So we're now moving away from, say, a managed fund where you're seeing yourself own a single portion of a unit or 1.1 unit or what have you, and you see a bit of income come in every year, and you're not really understanding of the underlying assets, who they're invested with, how the policy, the portfolio is actually designed, or that managed fund actually managed. They're not aware of that if you're looking at it just as a single line managed fund. Here you go, this is in your portfolio. It looks to be good for you. So at least now they can actually look to design a portfolio. They can actually say, well, actually, I'm more leaning towards ESG. Can we extract certain elements of the portfolio? I want to actually see elements inside there that sits with me on a personal level that I'm happy with, but also who's the manager in behind that, okay? What's their historical background as well? And it actually provides all that transparency, the management of the account, and the individual can actually see how they're invested day by day. With the use of HUB, and I actually have quite a few clients on HUB24, the application that they get inside HUB24 and the transparency across their portfolio when they open it online as well gives the client all the information they need in one hit, and that seems to satisfy these millennials a lot better than not knowing how they're invested. They want to know everything from start to finish, and managed accounts provide that information to them.
Right. Who wants to go next? Any comments?
Yeah, I would just echo the same. Oh, sorry. I would just echo the same thing. It's the transparency, especially with the ethical and social investing. I think, but also it gets them connecting and understanding their superannuation. Sometimes superannuation doesn't feel like their money. It's something that they've outsourced to their employer, and so this really gets them involved in understanding it more. And so, yeah, I think once you've got them understanding it more, they have those that they trust you more, they're more engaged, they become stickier, more clients, they stick around. So yeah, I think for me that's really important, the transparency of it, and them understanding what they're doing more. And also I like it from the advisor's point of view, because we don't have to do ROAs or SOAs. Of course there's a time saving for the advisor as well.
Yeah, good point.
I think there's
which means we've got more time to do what's important. It means that we don't have to sit doing back office compliance-y stuff. We can actually do more of what we're good at and what clients want. And that's, maybe we run a webinar, for our clients on, the Russia crisis and what it might mean to their super. Maybe we do one on the federal budget. We've got more time to dedicate to the things that actually add value. And this sort of, by having efficiencies through, things like this and model portfolios and all that sort of stuff, it means we've got our time back to add more value to where the areas most are important to clients.
Brett, there's two groups of people on this podcast today, those who are already using managed accounts, and all the words that Trent and Adele have said, I don't need to repeat, they will already know the advantages of those. And there'll be those that are thinking, have heard about it, have read about it or whatever, but haven't actually used them. And so it's from the business's point of view as much as the client's point of view as well. And there are a heap of reasons from a client's point of view why managed accounts are becoming increasingly popular, but also encourage those who are running practices or are deeply involved in businesses to seriously explore the benefits to the business and directly, therefore, the benefits to the clients of running managed accounts. Now, clear disclosure, if I could, we have been running our own managed accounts for over 4.5 years with HUB24. We have a very sizable amount now in 4 portfolios. One of the advantages that you can do is you can build managed accounts around thematics. And increasingly, and we've heard that about socially responsible investing, climate change impact, but also themes and trends for the future. And there's a lot of themes and trends that make sense. You can build portfolios that would engage millennials from their end that say, yeah, that makes sense, and I can see how easy I can do that. And the last part is technology is making it so much easier for millennials to be engaged in this type of investment process as well. So big fan from my point of view, big fan from our business point of view for managed accounts, and a shout out to HUB24, who have been a wonderful partner in doing that with us.
Great, thanks Peter. In interest of time, we're running out of time. I'm just going to ask you, and this is really hard, to just come up with a couple of key points, not extensive, but maybe in 30 seconds, of something you'd say would be essential to practices engaging with millennials. Like, what are your top couple of things, essentially? Who wants to go first?
Oh, top couple, that's hard. I would say the most important thing is to be authentic, to be yourself. We spoke about that, to be yourself. So if you don't wear a tie normally, like when I see someone in a tie, I'm like, oh, I think if you're not going to wear a tie normally, don't do that. So I think be authentic, because we millennials will pick up if you're not being authentic. Yeah, so I think that's the most important thing. I also think thinking about how you communicate with them. You need to have online calendar bookings. You need to make things easy for them to be able to work with you. DocuSign, make it easy for them, remove that friction. Think about it from the client's point of view. How can we remove that friction and make it easy? And then I guess I would say if any advisors are listening and they want to improve their millennial offering and how they connect and talk to millennials, by all means, please join my free Facebook community, my advisor buddies. If they just Google in Facebook, put my advisor buddies, there's a whole bunch of us in there sharing best practice. I do regular trainings in there as well. Brett, you guys are also getting me put a little cheat sheet together summarizing some of the stuff that I talk about today. I know I talk quick, so I'll make sure all the tools and technology I talk about today, I'll put a little cheat sheet together for everyone as well. And I'll make sure I share that with Brett, so you can distribute it to everyone, but also we'll put that inside the Facebook community as well.
Great. Trent, do you want a couple of key points?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think that coming out of a day and age where checkbooks were once a thing, we moved to online banking, I think it's exactly the same with millennials. So we need to make sure that we're up to date with them as much as possible in the way that they actually communicate, the way that they actually focus on, what's in front of them on their phone, or what they're searching or researching late at night as well. We need to be in that market so that they can actually view us, they can see us for who we are, and we can actually provide them with tips, tools, regulation updates, and everything like that on a regular basis via engagement, social media, giving them those advice pieces, as Adele was just speaking to before. I think that's absolutely fantastic, but also making sure that you're listening to the client. That's especially what these guys want. The millennials want you to sit there and listen. So we're nearly even turning into psychologists at the end of the day as well, for that of every other client, but we need to be listening to them, what they actually need. Otherwise they will lose interest, they'll become standoffish, and they won't engage with you as an individual. So that there are probably the tips that I have, is making sure that we're keeping up with them. We've got to make sure we're on board.
Great. Peter, do you want to finish with a couple of tips?
Yeah, happy to do so. The first one is from a business point of view. Make sure that it's a clear decision that you actually want to work with millennials, and if that is the case, make sure you do the homework to understand their thinking, their behaviour, their values. Most planning practices, wealth management practices, do it by accident rather than a conscious decision. If that is the case, and you want to move into millennials, again, I spoke about it before, Brett, about data mining. But go and work through all of the children and or grandchildren, let's call it children, who work for global organisations that will have stock options and equity, etc. So, be able to start to understand their role, their workings in a global world, and be able to start to target communications to them. The third thing is understanding where money might be in transition with some of these millennials. through sale of businesses, inheritances, divorces, sale of properties, etc. If they're roughly 30 to 40 years of age, they're already well in the workforce, and there's money in transition. Are we aware of it? Are we targeting it? And are we setting ourselves up to have engaging conversations with them? And the last part, and we've spoken about this all the way before, are we deliberately creating content and communicating it in the right way that millennials want to hear? And increasingly, are we doing that in a visual manner that engages them wherever, however that might well be as well? But it's an extraordinary marketplace, and it's not part of the future, it's part of the present. And the reason for this podcast is to challenge us to say, what are we going to do about it? And but it's extraordinary times to be targeting the right people for your practice.
Great, great tips by all of you. So thank you very much for that. So in finishing, I'd like to thank our panelists for sharing your views and insights. Really important, great tips and ideas, and getting your thinking around how to deal with millennials. Secondly, to everyone else, we will send out the tips sheet that Adele is kindly pulling together this week. And if you do want access to the paper, please let us know as well. So please enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you to Trent, Peter and Adele.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.